All right. Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Logically Speaking. We're going to be talking about criminal cases today. We're going to be looking at an overview of criminal cases and the stages of a criminal case and just kind of what that looks like in general, how things get started inside of the criminal justice world, and then what happens throughout those stages. So the first thing that happens, of course, is that a crime is reported somehow. A complaint is made, a crime is reported to law enforcement, and law enforcement starts an investigation. One of two things happen. If the crime is there, or they're able to speak with the defendant, if law enforcement sees the crime happen, or if they speak to someone and develop probable cause, and then they speak to the person alleged, who's called the defendant at that point in time, then for certain crimes, they can go ahead and arrest the defendant right then and there. But generally, what happens is they investigate the crime and then they develop probable cause and they go and seek an arrest affidavit and arrest that person if that person isn't available, probable cause hasn't been quite developed yet, or anything along those lines. But essentially, that's the beginning stages where we get to the arrest of the defendant at that point in time. And of course, that investigation stage can go quickly or it can take time. Investigations have gone on for years and they've also just happened within a matter of hours. And that just depends on how involved the crime is that they're investigating and what they need to do on that investigation. So that part can take some time. You may know you're being investigated and you may not know you're being investigated during those times as well. Of course, I'm going to caveat to that to say if law enforcement speaks to you and you're being investigated for a crime, please don't give any statements, right? So we don't want to give any statements to law enforcement for any reason at all. And I've done another video on that, but that is where we're at as far as that goes. And so then we get into the criminal justice system. So you get arrested on that arrest warrant or arrested on the probable cause, arrested for wherever we're at for that type of crime. And that's the arrest, right? So what you are arrested on, there are certain charges, and that's just called the arrest charges. Then we get into you're arrested. You will either get a bond set per a bond schedule at the jail, and if not, then you go and see a judge. If you are not bonded out, then you see a judge within 24 hours, where the judge will then also address your bond and any conditions of your release. The judge will either leave your bond the same. The judge can raise it for certain reasons. The judge can lower your bond for certain reasons once you see the judge at that time. But you have to see a judge within 24 hours. That is true for weekends, holidays, anything. In Florida, you have to see a judge within 24 hours of your arrest if you don't bond out. So then you see a judge. And then that starts some time frames and the clock ticking, if you will, for certain things to happen triggered inside the criminal justice system on your case. So if you remain in custody, if you don't bond out, then that triggers that the state has 30 days to formally charge you. And I am saying these words carefully because a lot of people say once they've been arrested, oh, I've been charged with a crime, but no, that's just the arrest. That's the allegation. Once the state determines what charges to bring formally, then they will formally charge you with a crime by information or indictment or so, their charging item that they use to charge someone formally with a crime. And those are the charges against you. Those are the formal charges against you. If you're in custody, the state has 30 days to do that. If you're not in custody, those time frames are different. They're larger, 90 to 120 or 180 days, depending on what the charge is that they have to charge you. But if you're in custody, they have a very short time. So once you're formally charged, then the next stage is called an arraignment. An arraignment is where you enter your initial plea. I did another video that just states generally in all cases, a defendant enters a general initial plea of not guilty, because that also now triggers timeframes for other things to happen, like the discovery that needs to happen in the case. And so we enter that in plea of not guilty at the arraignment. That happens very quickly. And then that triggers more timeframes. The state has a certain amount of time to turn over to you or to your attorney what's called the discovery, or the evidence that they have against you, the initial discovery. And that process, again, starts in a time frame that they have 15 days to let you know they have discovery for you. And then they just have to let you know initial discovery. Then we have timeframes that go on that aren't really set in stone, if you will, from that point, because that starts the discovery process and the investigation that the state and your attorney will do. And those can go very quickly, and they can also take a lot of time. And when I say very quickly, that's kind of relative to me because I've been doing this for a long time. I say quickly within, that's a few months. It doesn't generally go weeks or days or weeks. It takes several months to work through the discovery and the evidence and the things that need to happen. And it can also take several years. Our criminal justice system doesn't move quickly. It moves slowly throughout because things have to happen. Depositions have to be taken, and all of those things have to be coordinated with people, with your attorney, with the state attorney, with the witnesses. Things have to happen. Witnesses don't show up for depositions, so you have to schedule multiple deposition dates trying to get them. Of course, if there's things that your attorney needs to investigate for you and witnesses they need to talk to on your behalf, then, bringing an investigator on board or doing their own internal investigation and speaking to those witnesses, doing those things. And, they're not, unfortunately to say, they're not just working on your case during all of these things, right? There's other cases going on that they're also doing all these investigations on. So there's some time frames and things that go on, and they can take time to get there and to do the investigation thoroughly and properly. So it can take several months to several years, depending on the nature of the case. Obviously, the more serious the charge is, your murders, your attempted murders, any of those types of life felonies or punishable by life felonies, those serious felonies are going to take longer. They can take, a year to 2 years. I've had a murder case go for 5 years before we finally went to trial or to a resolution on the case. So they can take time. But other things, some misdemeanors or some simple felonies, what we call the simple possession drug charges, they can just take several months before they get to trial or to a resolution. So that's an overall time frame for the discovery and the evidence portion. The next portion has only two options. One, you can enter a plea to the charge, a plea of guilty or no contest for some sort of plea negotiation deal, or open pleading to the court, or you can take your case to trial. And so that's the only two options at that point, unless the state, for whatever reason, has reason to dismiss your case. Of course, there is that option. But assuming that the case isn't getting dismissed for some reason, then the only options are to plea to a negotiated plea or open plea to the court, or to take your case to trial. And again, now we're several months to sometimes several years through that discovery process, where we're at the resolution stage now of pleading or going to trial on your case. Your case would get set for trial. If you chose trial, the trial date would be set. And then the process of a trial will take place. We'll go over that in a different video, or we'll overview a trial in a different video. But then the trial process would take place for most cases. Depending on what happens at trial, the next stage that happens immediately after trial is the sentencing phase if you're convicted. You go right into sentencing. Most of the time, sentencing happens the day the jury returns the verdict of guilty. You're sentenced that day. There are certain times and certain circumstances where sentencing gets set off. Most people are remanded into custody if they're convicted, pending that sentencing. Sometimes, on rare occasions, the court will leave you out on bond pending your sentencing, but most of the time you are remanded into custody pending your sentencing. But again, generally, most of the time, people are sentenced the day of their trial, or the date that their trial ends, with the jury returning a verdict of guilty if they're found guilty. Of course, if you're found not guilty, then the court would enter that adjudication of not guilty, and you're free to go home for that day. But if you are convicted, you get sentenced that day. So you have to be prepared for whatever that sentence would be. Your attorney should prepare you for what the maximum sentence is, what the possibilities are, and you have to be prepared to go forward with sentencing at that time. Of course, if you're going to enter into a negotiated plea with the state attorney, you're going to know ahead of time what you're receiving from that for that sentence, whether it's probation or jail time or prison time or some combination. You're going to know what that is. What the day you enter that plea generally is also the day that you get sentenced, and so you have to be prepared for the sentence on that day as well. And then if you're going to enter an open plea to the court, meaning the state is not willing to negotiate, or you don't like the state's offer, so you're going to risk doing an open plea to the court. Again, the same thing generally happens. You're going to enter a plea and be sentenced that same day. So you have to be prepared for all of those potential possibilities of what your sentence could be. Be prepared to be sentenced that day. It is rare, but sometimes does happen that you can enter a plea and set off sentencing, but those are in rare and exceptional circumstances that happens. So that's an overall broad the stages of trial and kind of a really broad time frame. And I know there isn't anything definitive in there, that it can be months to years, but that is really what we look at inside the criminal justice system, depending on how long the cases take, how involved they are, how many witnesses there are, the type of charge that it is, how serious it is, versus how less serious it is. And serious meaning just the level of the crime, not obviously anyone going through the criminal justice system. It's a serious matter for them, but I mean, the level of crime is the seriousness. can all those things take into account how long it can take? Other things that can make it take a long time is if there are multiple defendants, what we call a co-defendant case. If it's two co-defendants or three co-defendants, I've had some up to 10 or 15 co-defendants, and all those take even longer because of the amount of discovery involved and the amount of coordination it takes between all of those attorneys and scheduling depositions and the things that have to happen and coordinating all of those things at the same time. So there's a whole lot of things that can determine how long your case will take. So, but in general, what I wanted to get through in this video is that the cases don't move quickly. Be prepared if you are involved in the criminal justice system to be patient. Be prepared that your case is going to take some time and have some patience as you're going through this. Allow your attorney to investigate, to do their discovery process, and just be patient with it and know it's not going to be done in any amount of time frame that you're going to want it done. It takes time. I hope that's answered some questions on overview, the stages of a criminal case and the time frames. And if you have any questions, feel free to give us a call and we'll see what we can do to help you. We'll see you next time.